Okay, so we're going to get started. Like I said, I apologize for the delay in getting started. Some days you just have bad computer days, and it is what it is. So there will be lots of things that go wrong, like the fact that your exercise handout today was supposed to have a back, but it doesn't. So it just happens, right? So beware if I touch your computer. Maybe bad. I don't know. No, so we're obviously going to get on to exercise 206. But before I do that, I want to point out that you got your first assignment. Unlike 135, where the assignments come like a week or two apart, this one, if you look at the due date, isn't due until March 6th. So you've got a lot of time between now and then. It's no surprise, however, that there's a lot of time between now and then because you have to build a bunch of skills before you can even do this. And that's to be expected. So I like to give it to you early so you can start thinking about it, start working on it, start designing it, evolve it as it goes along. We are looking for high levels of detail with good texture mapping and good materials applied. You don't know how to do texture mapping yet. That comes next week. So like I said, you don't have the skills to do it all this weekend, but that's okay. But if you end up with extra time, we finish what I'm working on today early or something like that, then by all means start thinking about your table and your chair. You're going to be designing a table and a chair. I am relatively loose with that definition. They can be two separate objects. They can be two integrated objects where the table is part of the chair. Gravity is not an issue in the world of Rhino. Therefore, I don't make it a requirement that your chair actually could support weight. It would be nice if you designed it in a way that it was somewhat realistic, but I'm loose about those kinds of things. Like I said, detail in how you model it matters. Cleanliness of how you model it, those kinds of things. And then also how you apply textures. Are they the right scale? Do they look correct? Or did you pick good materials to begin with? Those kinds of things. And obviously we'll talk through those as we go forward. You're going to do several different renderings. I forget how many I asked for. It's 3 renderings, different views. You can, of course, do more than that. You can always do more. I'm not expecting any environment. I'm not expecting there to be sun or sky or anything like that. It can be the generic white background. That's fine. And we'll go through how to set up some of those options and what have you. If you elect to use glass, reflections are always challenging, and in that case, it may be useful to have some sky or something, which I'm happy to help you do, but you won't have the skills to put in your own sky at that stage. But if it's something where you're using a lot of glass and you want to have that reflection, then I completely understand. So moving into exercise 206 for today, like I said, both with 205 and with 206, it's a very scripted, like everybody's making the same thing. But I'm trying to teach you certain tools so that you can learn the process of how you make certain things. So we're making today some things based on tubular structures. And you can see some of the pieces together like that. I don't even know if I have the whole... I thought I had the whole image here, but I don't even know if I have the whole image posted online because the back, if you click on the PDF, it's the same one that was printed, which doesn't have the back. So that's a problem. So I'll have to update that, but we'll go ahead and model it for right now anyway, so you can see the end result, and then I'll post it and update it. Okay, so we're going to start by creating a basic shape, which is a curve, a straight line, and then another curve. And I have some basic measurements that we're going to work from. And to do this, I'm going to start in the top view to make my initial drawing, and then I will continue in the 3D view using Rotate 3D, etc. The order in which I draw this really doesn't matter, but it's something to start to be aware of. I'm going to go ahead and start with the arc tool. And I want to think about which arc tool I really want. So I might click on here. And arc center, start, and angle might not be a bad one. This one at the end, arc start, end, and radius, might not be a bad one either. The key is that I know where my points are. So if I started, for example, with the center, start, and angle, I know that the radius is 2 inches. So that means I could start at 0,2 inches. Oops, sorry, 2,0 inches. Told you today was just going to be one of those days, right? 2, 0. There it is. And my first arc would be at 2 inches right there. My next arc would be right up there. So I can draw it that way. I could also draw it with a start. I could start at 0, 0. I could end at, well, I'll draw this one upside down, 2, -2. And then my radius would be 2, and it would make the same arc. It's just a different way of doing it. How you make it really doesn't matter. Then I'm going to go back to the polyline tool, and I'm going to draw a straight line segment for 13 inches. There it is. I'll hit Enter to finish. And I can do two things. I can come back to the arc tool, and this one's a little bit easier. Actually, let's do the start end. Let's do this one. So I'll go there, and then I'll say at 2, -2 to give me that lower point, and then my radius is 2 inches as well. And there we go. And I get that point. Alternatively, I could mirror this one to the other side. Once I have this shape, I'll go ahead and I'll join those together so that they're in one continuous curve. Now it's time to bring this one into the third dimension. So I'll move out of the top view and into the perspective view. And I'm going to use that rotate 3D command to rotate this up in the third direction. So I'll select it. I'll go up to transform and then rotate 3D. My axis of rotation will be right here along the bottom. My reference angle is going to be going right here along the y-axis, and I'm going to fold that so it's sitting up vertically. Okay, so I have that now, and now I'm going to use a command called a sweep tool. And what sweep does is it takes a cross-section curve and brings it along the length of another curve. So if I want a cross-section of a circle, in this case I'm making like a tube, I can start with the circle tool. I'll go right here to the start point, and I'll say that my diameter is a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to type D for diameter to make sure it's diameter, and then 0.5 inches. And there it is. So I have what's called a rail, and then I have a cross-sectional curve. So if I do a sweep, and I'll go up to surface sweep 1 rail, or I could type sweep 1, it's going to ask me to select the rail. There's my rail. Select cross-section curve. That's my cross-section curve. And when I hit enter, it's going to say, where do you want the seam to be? The default is just fine. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And we can now see, there's some options here, that it created this tube structure for me. Okay, pretty cool. I have some options with how it applies. I can use a road-like top, or I can use freeform. I'll explain what these are a little bit later. Freeform is what I want for right now. I don't need to worry about any of the simplifications. I'll just go ahead and say OK, and I'll end up with a very nice tube. So I can essentially follow any shape with a cross-section curve. So let's say that I go off here in space a little bit, and let me turn off ortho for a second. And I have a curve that's like that. Let me make it a little bit more complicated. Let's turn on a few points here. Let's move these up in space. Let's move those two down in space a little bit. All right, so you can see in the 3D world, I've got a little bit of a loop like that. Okay, I can take a cross-section curve on this. So we could do a circle again. Let me rotate this 3D. So that it's up in space, like that. And I could sweep that along this curve. So let's go up to surface, sweep 1 rail, rail first, then cross-section curve, enter, seam is fine, and it then builds that in essentially whatever shape I want. Make sense? Pretty cool, right? You can, okay, here's, let's take this. Could you do this in SketchUp? No, right? There is a revolve or a kind of a follow me tool. It can't do this. Okay? So this is where Rhino gets really fun, because you can really create pretty much anything you could possibly think of using a command similar to this. So let's say that instead of having the pipe, right, I wanted this to be like a giant ramp or something. I could draw the cross-section curve of what I wanted my ramp to be. Right? So let's see here. Let's make it come down a little bit. Come over. All right. It's not exactly correct, but it'll work. Let me rotate 3D. Oops, wrong way. Do that one more time. There we go. So it's like that. I could even take it as far as actually, let me do it this way. Rotate 3D. Sorry, I'm adding a little railing. Up in space. Let me mirror that one across. So essentially, anything that I can create, I can use as the sweep. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to Surface, Sweep One Rail. And my rail is, again, going to be that curve. Select Cross-Section Curves. This time I'm going to pick this one, but I'm also going to pick this and this. So I end up with 3 cross-section curves. I'll go ahead and press Enter when I'm done. Oh, really? Let me try that one more time. Let me do them as separate. Sweep 1. Rail, there, enter, seems fine, and I end up with that shape. Okay? See how it kind of, as I start to curve, it banks. It's almost like a bank turn. If I switch from freeform into road-like top, and then click Preview, it's going to keep my cross-section level as I go up. So it's more like a flat path. You guys see the difference? So we'll leave it as road-like top. I'll go ahead and say OK, and that then builds that shape. Let me go ahead and sweep again. Sweep 1. There's my rail again. I'll pick this as my cross-section curve. There's my seam. Road-like top. I'll say OK. And there's the rail that goes on one side. And go ahead and do the same thing with my sweep 1. There. And there's the railing on the other side. So you can see you can start to create some fairly complex things. And whatever the cross-sectional shape is just fine. Now the other thing that I can do, and thus far we've done all sweep 1s. Let me take this. Let me copy this over to here. And let me copy it. I'll go right there. And let me scale down just a little bit. And let me turn points on. Put that in a little bit. So I'm making some modifications. Okay, so I have 2 curves this time. Let me take the cross-sectional curve right there. And let me copy this from there to there. And let me move this right there. So I have 2 different curves here. Those are a little close. They're going to be problematic. Let me move these away. All right, that'll work. So if I did a sweep 1, we'd end up with essentially this curve. But if I do a sweep 2, so let me go to Surface, Sweep 2 rails, it's going to ask me for the first rail, then the second rail, then the cross-section curve there. And when I hit Enter, it's going to be responsive to how far they are apart. right? So in this case, the two curves get closer together, the cross-section gets smaller. As the two curves get further apart, the cross-section gets bigger. So it grows and shrinks depending on the two rails. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you sweep across these various pieces. I'll go ahead and say, OK, those were all extra illustrations for what we're doing. So let's go back to the stuff that we were originally creating down here. So let's zoom, select it. So this was a very simple sweep. It's just a circle. We're creating a pipe. I'm going to then create two little dots at the bottoms here. So let me go ahead, and under the presets, I'm going to use a cylinder. I want to snap to my center, so I'll turn center on so I can snap. Whoops. So I can snap right there to the center. There it is. My diameter this time is going to be 1.5 inches. There it is. And my thickness, oh, I don't know, let's do negative 0.25 inches. And there's my first. Then I want to take this little piece that I created, and I'm going to copy it. But this time I'm going to copy it V for vertical. So see how it says point to copy from, or I have an option to say vertical. Rather, if I did a standard copy, it would just move in the X and the Y. So in this case, I want it to move vertically. And we're going to take this and move it down. Let's go 0.75. How about negative 0.75? There we go. And I now create the lower piece there. So I can take those two, select them, and I can mirror those to be on this side. So I'll go to transform, mirror, pick the midpoint, and I can create the opposite side like that. So now the next piece is I'm going to create this shape, this X shape. So I need a second one to create that X shape. So let me take it like this, and I'll go ahead and I'll copy it. So I can type copy, or go to transform and then copy, and I'll just move it over here. Then I'll take the one that I copied, and I'm going to use just a regular rotate, not a 3D rotate. So I'll go up to transform and then rotate. And again, it'll be right from the center. Let me turn on ortho here for a second. And we're going to turn it sideways. Then I can move that. So I'll go back to transform and then move. Again, right from the center so that the two overlap right there. And so now I have that shape established. What we're ultimately making is something that looks like this. Something that looks like this. That's clamping a piece of glass together. This has a little bit of different flair. The one I'm doing is a simplified version. But essentially, this is the kind of thing that we're creating. Right? And we'll do these little cables and that sort of thing as we go forward. There's another example there. That's essentially what we're making. OK. So there it is. I've got those pieces. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the whole thing 45 degrees. So I'll rotate the whole thing from point 0, 0, 45. And conveniently, it lines up very nicely on a 1 foot by 1 foot rectangle. All right, there's a reason I gave you the sizes that I did. So, OK, so now that I have this piece figured out, I want to create, and this is where I didn't give you the correct handout. So this is rather challenging. I want to create a straight spire that goes up with a little donut on the end. And again, I'll upload the drawing so you guys can see it. And I apologize that I didn't do it correctly. So I need to create this little centerpiece. And I'll do that over here on the side. So I'll go ahead and start, same that I did before. And it doesn't matter where it is, because I'm going to move it later. And I want a line, and we'll call it 2 feet. And now, the measurements that I'm drawing right here might not match the drawing, because I don't even have the drawing. I'm doing this by memory. So it's a little challenging. But anyway, we'll survive. So I'll go ahead and draw that at 2 feet. And I can use a circle and we'll do the same 1/2 inch diameter, so 0.5. And I'm going to rotate this 3D. Remember, I can always go up to transform, rotate 3D. And we'll fold that up. And then we'll do a sweep 1. So transform, or excuse me, surface, sweep 1 rail, rail, cross section, enter, enter. And I end up with that piece. The alternative to this, and again with Rhino, there's always different ways of modeling. I could instead go to the cylinder tool. I could come right here to my center at my midpoint, a diameter of 0.5, and a height of 2 feet. And that would essentially make the same thing. It's a simple object. I could do a curve and I could extrude it. So there's 3 different ways of making it. When you get to the more complicated things, doing a sweep is often a good strategy. So let's put a little donut at the end. This donut is going to hold the cable that goes by. And like I said, this is a simplified version of what this would look like in real life. So let me go ahead and draw a circle. And I want the cable to be 3/8 of an inch in diameter. So I'll do a diameter of 3/8 inches. There it is. I'll do another circle. And it'll be an outside diameter of, let's say, 1.75, so 1 3/4 of an inch. There it is. Now, I want to make a donut with a cross-section that goes between these two. So I'm going to use my circle tool again, but this time I'm going to pick the diameter of the circle, not the center and the radius. So I'll pick diameter, and I'll go from there. Notice I have quad snap on, which is the 4 corners of a circle, if there were corners on a circle. North, south, east, and west. And I'll go from here to right there. So you see I create a circle that goes between this circle and that circle. Then I can take this circle and rotate 3D. There. And I can fold it up. And now I can do a sweep of this. So in this case, I could do a sweep 2 rails or a sweep 1 rail. It doesn't make any difference. So I'll go to surface, sweep 1 rail. That's my rail. There's my cross-section curve. And it makes that little donut for me. Obviously, I have some intersections, so we need to clean things up a little bit. So in this case, I find that using the ghosted display is helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and use this object as my trim. So I'll go to Trim. It says Select Cutting Objects. I'll pick this object. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And then I'm going to select this end and that end. But I want it to get rid of this piece of it too. So I'll select that, and now that's nice and clean. So now that that's nice and clean, let's put it up here on top. Let me get rid of that one, and now we're going to use this one. So I'll take this. I'm going to move this from that center to match up with the center that's right there. And again, this ghosted display can be helpful because you can kind of see through and see, oh, yeah, that's the center. There it is. Let me rotate 3D. And I'll go out, and then there, and we'll fold it up. So that's ultimately what we're looking for. Okay? And if the measurements aren't quite right, no big deal. We're just practicing. So there's that piece. I'll go ahead and create the cable that goes out. So let's use a line. It goes right here from the center. Let's have it go straight out 6 feet. There it is. And I can sweep 1 with that cross-section, or excuse me, that rail, that cross-section curve. This should be freeform. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And so now I have the first piece of the cable. At this point, I could also create the glass wall. And again, I'll show you all of this, and I'll put the drawing up there. I know I go quickly in this, and I'll repeat. I'm going to go ahead and start with a box. And we'll go ahead and start right here at the center, and then I'll move it down afterward. So let me go right to the center. Sometimes you have to readjust to try to find. There's my center. There we go. And so this is going to be at 4 feet, 6 feet. And it's going to be negative 0.5 inches thick. So there's my piece of glass. Let's move this vertically. And it's going from right there. And it's going to go down so that it's in between these two pieces. So that was 2 inches plus 1/4 of an inch, so 2.25 inches. Sorry, negative 2.25 inches. And if I did it correctly, it should show up right in between those two little pods. Let's take a look in regular shaded mode to see how I did. Yep, that looks right. And so the last piece would be to take this, rotate 3D, and flip it up so it's vertical. And we could actually move this so that that corner is at 0, 0, 0. Right, like that. So this is ultimately the goal of what we're trying to make today. And I'll take an image of this and I'll post it so you guys can see it. And then I'll also post the drawings in there with the measurements on them so that you guys can see it. I wanted to get to the point where I had this so that I can leave it up there so you can see it. But now I'll go back and I'll review going through all the steps again. It doesn't hurt for me to go back through. Okay? So if you feel comfortable with what I did, go ahead and get started. If you don't, I'm going to go through the whole thing one more time so that you can see it. So let me go ahead and open up. You have a question first? Yeah, okay. I'll come and help you in just a second. Most of you turned and looked at your computers. I'm guessing that means you feel comfortable starting. So why don't I let you start, and then if I see a lot of people getting stuck on something, I'll repeat. Fair enough?
Can you just write down measurements real quick? Is that possible?
Sure. I'll draw it on the board and do it that way.